we'll see where that takes us. So I'm just going to share my screen right now, and let's talk DAX. Okay, so all right. So what I have done is I have tried to bring in a very, very small table. So what I have is a table that has a small Excel sheet that has 3 tables. We have the first table as the product table. All it just has is the product ID, the category, the name, and the price. All right. And we have the customer table that just has a few customers because we want to make this as simple as possible. And um, the the sales table that has just how many transactions, just a few of them, okay, about 999 transactions, right? Or 998 transactions, yeah. And the transactions are just the invoice number, the country, and the salesperson, the date of the sales, and the customer that bought it, but we have gotten this from the customer table, so it's just the customer ID. And we have the product ID, which was also derived from the product table, and the quantity sold. But if you look at what we have here, you would find out that we did not have the price, as in the unit price, all right? And we did not bother to have that because the unit price is already contained in this part of the table. Okay, so it would amount to duplication, having the unit price there, and then having to run those calculations. So we just want to freestyle, and thank goodness we're just a few in class today. So we're just going to have a freestyle, just practice, and then have fun. I'm going to give you a secret. We are also learning DAX. So I do not like to say DAX is about trial and error, but sadly, that's what it is. The thing is this, even the guys that even feel CMAC, the Microsoft Power BI program manager, would always tell you, even CMAC learns DAX from a lot of people. So imagine when the creators of DAX learn a lot from people. And the reason is simple. You know how you create something and all of a sudden you discover that there are a lot of unwanted parts in that thing you're creating. So that thing you've created has become a monster that you don't even know the whole part of it. So that's how DAX is. There are a lot of things that unfold when you use DAX. And we do not have a comprehensive material yet that covers all of that in a very, very succinct way. So what it looks like is, it tends to look like we do a lot of trial and error when we are trying to learn DAX, all right? So welcome Dolly, welcome Val, welcome Mama Val, you guys are welcome to the session. So what happens is it looks like we try to do a lot of trial and error when we try to do DAX, but that's not really like, it doesn't make you a bad person. So what it does is, when you try this and it doesn't work, it doesn't give you what you want, you try something else, So what I'll try to do is, I'll just do some examples, and then in some other forum, maybe we could play with some real life data or something, even in our Slack work group, we could just come up with something like that. So these are the 3 tables, and in order to save time, I have just imported them before time in Power BI. So you'd see the 3 tables here. You see the customer table, the product table, and the sales table. All right. So these are the 3 tables, and the date table, as usual, I have created that with Calendar Auto, and I explained this earlier. And I've also created the year, all right, the month number, the quarter, and I have set this table as the date table, all right, and I have also by clicking this, I have ask Power BI to always sort this place by month number. So at every point in time, January is going to appear first because it's month number 1, and February is going to appear first. If you don't do this in some reports you're trying to generate, you're going to see April as the first month because April begins with letter A. And letter A would, after April, you would see August, and you really do not want that to mess your report up. So you just get to create a month number, and the function is very easy. You could either use the month, date, or you could use format like this one we have here, and date, and then you put yeah, just one M. I explained all of this, I think, in module 4 when we were doing all of this. So I've done all of that, and I have created the relationship. So this is just a small table. It just has 4 tables. This is the customer, the product, the dates, product, and the customer tables. And these are called dimension tables, and this is a fact table. So this sales table is a fact table in the sense that it contains all of the transactions, all right? So, and if you notice that it's a one-to-many relationship here between the customer ID and the customer ID column in the sales table. So what it means is that there is a one-to-many relationship here, which means that there is one customer here, but he can have a lot of transactions here. Same thing for here. There is a product here in the dimension table, but it can appear a lot of times here. Somebody can buy as many products as possible. I mean, that's what we want. And then same thing for date here. It's just one unique date in the date table, but in this fact table, which is the sales table or the transaction table, if you like to call it that, we'll have a lot of transactions on a particular day. So 5th of January can have 200 transactions, can have 500 transactions, right? But here we must have just one because every dimension table has to have just unique values, all right? So here we are, we have set all of that. And so what's going to happen right now is I'm going to go to my data view. Remember when I showed you the Excel, I showed you that here you didn't have the total revenue because you're going to have to derive that, all right? So let's talk a bit about DAX. But before we start talking about DAX, let's talk about context. Context. And I'm sure you've heard this word before, context is king, all right? And so when we talk about context, there are just 3 kinds of context. There's the row context, there's the query context, and then there is the column context, filter context. So I'm just going to show some examples that show how each of these contexts work, so that you can understand how Power BI does its own calculations, all right? So let's begin with the row context, because the row context is like the base, is the key way Power BI does its calculations, all right? Everything begins with the row context. Then the query context and the filter context are interruptions on the row context. So too much grammar. Let's show some examples. Now, let's begin with this table we have here. I'm just going to move it to the sales table. So if you remember, we do not have a total revenue amount, which we ought to have gotten by multiplying this and something else, all right? We don't have that, so we have to derive that, all right? Now, before we derive that, let me show something, okay? Okay, let me just show something about how row context works, because row context help define relationships and all of that. And I'll just give an example. Now, how do I create a column that would show me the total revenue of this. Remember, for this day in the transaction, we have 73, all right? And this is product 009. So product 009, if we go to our product table, is mango, and it goes for 40.84. So I'm just going to go back. So 40.84 times 73. If I go back to my sales table, so I should get something around 2,000. Okay, let me just do that. Let me just do that. So it's 73 times 40.84. Okay, so 2,981.32. So that's what I should get. But let's just do it in Power BI right now, and let's see what it comes to. So I'm going to create a new DAX calculation. But like I told you, a DAX calculation can either be a table, it can either create a new column, or it could just be a measure. And a measure is just like when we were talking about introduction to DAX, I told you a measure is like a cup or a waffle cone or something that you take to your ice cream dispenser, which is your data, and you use that to get the serving or whatever it is you want to help yourself with. All right, so that's what a measure is. A measure is just like a cup or a plate or something that you use to cut out of your big data. All right, so in this case, I just want to create a new column. All right, that is just going to tell me, hey, this is the total revenue generated from this. So I'm just going to use the new column option. All right, remember, I have to click on the sales table to make sure that I'm in the sales table, and then I click on a new column. All right, so you notice that because of that, automatically Power BI creates that new measure that I want to create in the sales table. So I'm going to call this total revenue. All right, and I'm going to say total revenue is equal to, now the normal thing is I'm going to use quantity sold here, which is this. Remember, it's domiciled in the sales table, which is this, and then the column. So the table name is on the outer part, and then the column name is always in square brackets. So sales times, now how do I get the value of the products? I can see it here. I'm going to use one function. It's called related. And that's why you have to create your relationships very well, because without creating the relationships very well, this function is not going to work. So when I open that up, Power BI brings out all the tables that have a relationship with this sales table that I'm on. So it tells me, okay, you have customer table, you have your date table, you have your product table. And I'm going to tell Power BI that the value I wanted to look at is in the price column, all right? And when I do that, what happens is Power BI is going to look for what is common between this table and that table. And Power BI knows, okay, it's a product ID that is common between this table and the sales table. So it's going to go into products ID and look for 009, and it's going to take the value it has there and multiply it by the quantity sold. So I'm just going to press enter, and let's see what happens. Ready? Boom. All right. So I could just turn this to two decimal places, and let's see how this works. Okay, so 1, 2, 2, 2. All right. Okay, so we have so we have a piece of data here, 2981.98, and I'm going to confirm that it gels with what I had in Excel. Oh, I've removed it. Okay, so I've removed it. Well, basically that's what I had here, 29 something. Okay, so now I have my total revenue and we're good. All right. Remember, you can interrupt me at any time. This was a live class. Don't worry about recording. Anyone that's listening to recording will be glad that you interrupted me because they're going to get new insights from the questions you're asking. And I'm also going to get new insights too because I do not consider myself a Power BI guru, right? Okay, so yeah. So this is it. Now I have gotten my total revenue. So right now, if you notice what happened, Power BI had to evaluate each of these on a row by row basis. So it had to first take this row, go look for the other table that I wanted to pair it with, get the value, multiply it and get this, take the next row, multiply it and get that, take the next row, multiply it. Now, what we just did now is what is called row context. So that is what we will say we are evaluating a DAX function based on the row context. And the row context is like the base context. It's what Power BI does every time you write a DAX measure or a DAX column or a DAX table. All right. That's what Power BI does. It begins with the row context. But then sometimes you might want to interrupt the row context for one reason or the other. And I'm going to show you a good example right now. So this is it. Now, let me put a visual here. So I'm just going to put a card, all right? And then I'm going to put this total revenue that we got here, okay? I'm going to put a table and I'm going to put this total revenue here, or let me use a matrix. So, okay, so I'd have total revenue in the values. Then I'll have products name in the rows. And I'm going to put, let me see one more visual here. Okay, I'm going to put a bar chart here. And I'm going to put the same thing in here. So I'm going to put product name as the, sorry, no, not price, come on. So I'm going to put name on the axis. And I'm going to put the total revenue here. Now, what you're going to discover is that I have the same total revenue in these three visuals, but this one is showing as a total sum, not broken down. This one is showing broken down into fruits, and this one is showing broken down into fruits in order of magnitude. What has happened is very simple. Just same measure, but the visual is determining the visual is determining the way that measure is interpreted by Power BI. What you call this is the query context. So remember, to evaluate each of these, Power BI has to go row on row, row on row, row on row to get the total. When it gets the total, it asks you, how do you want to present it? You say, I want to present it in a card. It says, okay, you know what, for a card, the kind of query I'm going to generate this card, it's not something very serious. It's just a total query. For this, to say the kind of query I need to have to generate this would be maybe a query that I don't want to go too technical, but we're going to do DAX queries maybe by next week or next 2 weeks so that you could see how these queries get evaluated. And same for this one. So what's happening right now is that Power BI is determining the query context by itself. This art of determining query context by itself is what you call implicit query context generation. So most times, like practically 99% of the time, the query context you're going to be using would be implicitly generated by Power BI. All right. So yeah, so that's it. Now, the last context we're going to talk about are filter context. So what is a filter context? A filter context is very simple. All right. A filter context is a context that gets added when you specify filter constraints on a row or a query context. So if for any reason I'm creating this DAX function and I specify, okay, so calculate this, where this is this, or maybe where fruit is apple or product is mango or whatever. The moment I start specifying stuff in my DAX function, I'm creating a query context. Sorry, a filter context. And if you want to create a filter context, you almost always will have to use the function calculate. Almost always. I know there are a couple of times you could go around it, but the right thing is whenever you want to create a filter context, you use the calculate function. All right. So I'm going to delete all of this, and then let us look at some use cases for each of these functions, and they'll probably take one or two questions, and we'll call it a day. All right. And now, so remember you have this data set here, and you now have your total revenue. Okay. So your boss wants two pieces of, maybe your boss says, I need two visuals from you as part of your report on transactions. So he says, I need one that shows me the ranking of all the products. All right. And maybe you should just tell me one other visual that we could play around with. So let's start with the first visual, which is I want to rank each of those products for me. Now, I remember I told you guys that whenever you look at whenever you look at Power BI, anytime you want to create a visual, you should always create a measure for yourself. Never rely on implicit measures that Power BI creates for you. And I'm going to explain one of the reasons why I'm going to do what I want to do right now. So if you look at this, when we created this column called total revenue, we didn't ask Power BI to sum it up for us. All right. We just told Power BI, hey, give us total revenue. That's why when you looked at this function, you wouldn't see sum or any other aggregating function here. So what we did, we just told Power BI, hey, give me the total revenue. All right, which is based on this. So, but Power BI has gone a step further and has added the total, because anywhere there is a figure, a number, or whatever you want to call it, what Power BI does is Power BI automatically creates the totals. And that's why if you look at what we have here, if you look at, I think we have that in customer. Okay, there is one that's okay, but if you look at this quantity sold, you've noticed that Power BI has already created a total for you, and that's we don't really need that. We don't really need summarization. Okay, so if you look here, you can just change it to don't summarize. All right, but let me just do that. So what we're doing, we're telling Power BI, hey, we really do not need some summarization here. It's not really something that you should do. But by default, Power BI creates those summarization measures, and could be a problem if you are not very careful with that. Okay. So it's the same thing with this measure here. All right. Power BI, though we created it to multiply this, if you notice, you see that sigma inside of the measure sign. Power BI again has gone the extra mile for us and has added the summarization. And you can decide to change it to don't summarize, all right? And so that Power BI can remove that default summarization there. But even at that, now that Power BI has removed the default summarization, what happens is we will now have to create our own summarization, because that's why we remove that default summarization there. We don't want Power BI to summarize for us. So we're going to create a measure that really gives us the sum of total revenue for sales. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to come here because I always like my measures being in the transactions table. All right, so I'm going to create a new measure. Now, some people like to create a new table that has all the measures, but why I don't like that is if you create a new table, then you can't relate it with anything. It's going to just be hanging, and it makes my data model looks very funny. All right, because if I create a new table right now that houses all the measures, when I look at the view of the data model from here, I will have an orphan like one, it's just going to be like a table just hanging there on its own, like an orphan, all right? Somewhere around here, and it's just awkward. So I really do not like that awkwardness. So I'm just going to go back here and I'm going to create my new measure for total sales. And I'm going to call that total sales measure. So total sales measure, and it's going to be sum of all the values in the total revenue. And if I want, what format should I use? Okay, so I'm going to make this should I make a currency. Let's just be a decimal number. All right. Okay, so and I'm going to make it to 2 decimal places. Great. All right. So now we have our sum. Now I'm going to bring in a report. I like matrix reports a lot because number one, it allows me to validate the functions, the DAX functions that I have in my model. So I'm just going to use the the product name in the rows. All right, so maybe I should just increase that a bit and so go to the grid and increase the font size to 14. I think it works. Okay, great. Okay, then I'm going to put my measure, total sales measure here, where the values are generated. Okay, so my measure is showing that way because I'm just going to click on this so that I can put a comma separator there. All right, and yeah, so it looks better right now. Okay, so here we are. I have my sales measure. Okay, and I have my products right now. But remember what my boss wants is he wants to see the ranking. Okay, so if I were doing this in Excel, can anybody guess the function I would use? You'd have functions like rank. You would have functions like you could use functions like small. You could use functions like large. You could use functions like there are a lot of functions that you could use. All right, but in Power BI we do not have all of this luxury. In Power BI, we have only one function for ranking, okay, which is called rank X. And that X there just tells you that, hey, it's an iterator. So it has to follow the row context, you know, before it gets deployed. All right. So I'm looking at the chat to observe if I have any questions, but I don't see any. So I'm just going to continue until someone interrupts me or until there's a question in the chat. Okay, so I'm going to now try to create a new measure. Remember, I told you anything you want to create in Power BI, you have to create a measure really. Okay, so yeah, thank you guys. So I'm going to create a new measure. Oh no, my bad. I tried to create that measure from the column here. And it's going to, if I click that, see what's happening, it's going to just go through that measure anywhere it likes. Can I just let me, okay, I've removed it. All right, so I'm just going to go to my sales table and I'm just going to right click from here, create the new measure so that the measure can reside in my sales table. I can always change the domicile table later on if I don't like where it appears. Or I've shown how to do that, so I'll not waste my time and yours doing that right now. So I'm just going to create a measure and I'm going to call this sales ranking. All right, and I'm going to call this rank X. Now, what is rank X asking me for? It's asking me for a table. So now I'm going to choose the table. I'm going to do something very wrong right now, and it's not going to work. And I'm going to show you why it did not work so that when you next you encounter this, you can understand why it didn't work and then what you could do about it. So I'm going to do the wrong thing right now. Now I'm going to say rank X. It's asking me for a table right now. So I'm going to, because I want to rank the products table. So I'm just going to select the products table. Sorry, yeah, product table. Okay, sorry. Rank X, I'm going to select the product table. All right. Okay. So what it's asking me for right now is, so what do you want to evaluate in the product table? So I'm going to use the sum, or instead of using the sum, since we've already calculated the total sales, I could just use this measure here, total sales measure. Oh, come on. All right, so just use this measure here as the expression. Okay, then it's asking me for value, order, and ties, what to do when they are ties. All right, but in the real sense of the word, these other parameters are in square bracket. And if you remember, I told you whenever a parameter is in square brackets, it's not really compulsory. So I'm just going to close this out and I'm going to press enter. Now, in my mind, I hope this works. And I'm going to move my ranking. I'm going to select this visual again so that it brings out all the fields for me. All right, then I'm going to move this new measure I created called sales ranking and I'm going to put it here. Okay. Oh, it didn't work. Travesty. Okay, so this is it. Why it didn't work is that there is already a filter context existing here. Now, anytime you have already created a visual and you're trying to introduce another measure into the visual, remember, once you create a visual, automatically you're creating a filter context. Because in this case now, a filter context exists, the products, all right? If the filter context, if we had said, okay, by month, the filter context that exists here would be by month, all right? So the moment a filter context already exists on a visual and you're trying to introduce another measure, what it does is that it forces that measure you're creating, all right, and bends it to the filter context that exists already. Most of the time, it's going to give you a wrong answer. So what do you do? Whenever you want to, introduce a new calculation like this one, you have to alter the filter context that is existing in the visual already somehow. And if you look at that DAX textbook that I showed you, that we shared, you would see that there are about 7 or 8 formulas you can use to alter filter context. There's all except, remove filters, keep filters, plenty, there are about 7 or 8, about 10 of them, I think. All right. But one of the Swiss Army, if you like to call it that, filter functions that removes filter functions is the function all, ALL. So I'm just going to introduce that here. I'm going to click on this sales ranking, and now just here I'm going to remove what I had here before. And okay, no, let me remove the whole function and start from here. So rank what, I'm going to introduce that, my beautiful filter. So if I do that, if you look at what this function does, you see it returns all the rows in a table or all the values in a column, ignoring any filters that might have been applied. So when I use this and I say all, it's going to ask me for the table or the column name. All right. So the one I'm interested in is this product name, because I want to rank all the product names. All right. So that's the one I'm going to choose. And I'm going to, put a comma here because I've supplied the product name. Okay. So, sorry, I'm going to have to close that. Yeah, put a comma here so that I progress to the expression. So what is the expression here? The expression that I want to evaluate is the total sales measure. So remember, if I'm ranking, I have to rank the table, then by what? So in this case, I want to rank the table by the total sales that exists. So I'm going to press enter now and cross my fingers. I hope that it works. It worked, it worked, it worked. Okay, yeah. So now I can decide to sort this stuff, all right, by alphabetical, that's alphabetical order of magnitude. So we have mango, and that's the first. We have orange, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth. All right, and we have Maltesers, which curiously didn't have any sales for the period. All right, that's why it's blank, because there was nothing that was done on it for the period. So we'll have it at 10th position. But here you would notice that Microsoft, in their infinite wisdom, has created a submission column for me here. This is one of the problems we have been begging Microsoft to deal with, because I mean, something as beautiful as DAX should be intelligent enough to know that when I rank something, you can't still give me the total. So Microsoft has refused to do this for us. And if I want to turn this off, Microsoft does not give me the Power BI does not give me the opportunity to turn it off just for this column. It means I have to turn it off for the whole visual. And I want this one to show, all right? So what is going to happen is that I'm going to have to write a DAX measure that will tell this column, all right, to look at this whole place. And then if there is any repetition, because most times the repetition is going to be either because of a product type or because of, but in this case, most times this place will return 1. Usually, most times the total will always return 1. So the DAX function I'm just going to write to tell Power BI, hey, if 1 is duplicated, remove the one that's make this one blank. All right. So it's a very not too long but complicated DAX measure, because we've been begging Microsoft to if you notice, you'll see under the help where you have submit an idea. My people have been submitting ideas and Microsoft hasn't done anything about it. So yeah, we're stuck with that for now until we hope Microsoft is going to be willing to change all of that. So that's one way you can go about it. All right. So right now we have our ranking. Some other information you might want to have, for example, is you probably might want to know, okay, what percentage of this whole product is this mango? Okay. Again, when you have this, all right, existing. Okay, let's try that. Now I'm just going to create a new measure. All right. And remember, what we want to do is we want to get the total of this whole place, which is this, and then we want to divide this by this. But again, Microsoft has not given us a DAX function that divides an item with the what do you call it now? With the sum. All right, so we have to technically break this visual into two. We have to create the numerator and we have to create the denominator. So already we have the numerator here, all right? But we need the denominator, okay? So we need our denominator here. Now, I'm going to have to create the denominator as a column so that I can do this column by this column, all right? In this visual. So what am I going to do right now? Remember, the reason why you're seeing this thing here is because there is a filter function or the filter context being applied here. So I'm just going to remove this filter context. Now, here comes the beautiful part. So where is my new measure at? Let me just create a new measure and I'm going to create the denominator. So to create the denominator, let me call this denominator total sales denominator. All right. You can name your measure anything you want to name it, but for the purpose of this class, I think this is the name that comes to my head. All right. So total sales denominator. And okay, so now I could do this calculate. All right. Because I'm trying to break or in quotes destroy the filter context that we have here. So I'm going to try to calculate, since I already have this measure here that gives me this, I'm going to try to destroy all the filters here in this measure. So under this calculate, the expression is asking me for, I'm going to say, yeah, total sales measure. But then I want to destroy the filter from me. So I could use all, I could use remove filters, I could use what's the name of this other function that removes the filters? Well, let me use remove filters here. Okay, so it's going to ask me on what column are the filters existing currently, the filters that this visual is using. So the filters that this visual is using is existing on the product column. That's this product name. All right. And I'm just going to close this, press enter. So when okay, so it's refreshing this right now. I'm going to click on this visual so that the fields can appear. All right, great. So when I bring this measure, total sales denominator here into the values, Let's see what happens. Do you notice what happens? It has removed all the filters that this visual is giving me. All right. So now I have my total sales here and I have my denominator here. So now I can have a measure that divides this, which is the numerator, by this. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another measure here, new measure. I'm going to create that as, I'm going to call that sales proportion. All right. So I'm going to call that sales proportion. That would be equal to, luckily we have a function called divide. All right. And why I use this function called divide, normally I could always do this measure like this, total sales measure divided by total sales denominator. Oh, sorry, total sales measure. I could always do it like this, total sales measure divided by total sales denominator. But this is a problem with this. Oh, come on, it's supposed to be denominator. This is a problem with doing it this way. For this one that is blank, it's going to be 0 divided by this. I don't know what it's going to give me, but most likely it's going to give me an error. So by using that divide function, what it does is it gives me an opportunity to do error handling. So you can see it's a safe divide function with the ability to handle divide by 0 case, all right? So I don't know if 0 divides something will give me an error, but I know if I divide something by 0, I'll get an error. So, but just to be safe, I'm going to, Power BI is asking me for the numerator right now. I'm going to supply the numerator total sales measure. Okay, and then the denominator right now would be total sales denominator. And then if there is a problem, just return 0 for me. So I'm just going to press enter right away. And I'm going to click on this visual again so that I could activate the fields here. All right, so then I'm going to take this sales proportion and put it as the column here. All right, oh, I forgot to change this. So let me just change this measure to percentages. Okay. So what you'll notice is that for this one that is blank, no, no, that's not the one I want you to change. Come on. Sorry, I pressed the wrong one. I actually supposed to change the sales proportion measure and not the total sales denominator measure. Okay, so yeah. So sales proportion measure, and I'm going to change this to percentage. Right. So here you have it. Sales proportion is going to show in percentages right now. And here you'll notice that this one is blank and it's not disturbing our calculation in any way. All right. So these are like the two we can take right now. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to look at them. Right. So I guess I have been talking a lot. I hope I've not been blabbing. Yikes. Okay. All right. So questions, queries, annoyance, disagreements, any? Oh, thank you, Gus. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Joe, are we together? Have I offended anyone? Have I, I said what I'm not supposed to say? Okay, Gus, thank you. Thank you, Gus. Thank you, brother. That's great to hear. I don't know if, let's see who is in the house. Okay, hola, hola. Yay. Well, I hope the session is not confusing. Is it? Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ola. Thank you. All right. So I think I will do a little more session. I'll do a couple more session on DAX. Somia, I have always tried to pronounce your name the right way, but I seem to always come short. So I'm sorry. Thank you, Baba Val. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So, in the absence of any questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to make the recording available as soon as I can once this session ends. But again, if there is anything you would want us to discuss, we could always discuss that on the Slack. All right. So, thank you, everyone, for